Thanks for being here. You could be anywhere and you chose to be here. This is Lily, and this is Affirming Self. Guys, I am so excited to share with you what's been on my heart and mind these past few days. I feel like as I've gotten into this whole world of podcasting again this season, there has been such an exciting opportunity to have an issue, which is having so many different ideas that come up after I go back and listen to the podcast I just recorded. It's such an amazing thing for me when I stop and think about, wow, there's all these different ideas and things that are swimming around, and I get the opportunity to tackle each of them. The challenge is, which is a good challenge to have, is which one to tackle first. So today we're going to tackle the subject of boundaries and people pleasing when it comes to developing your own personal values. You might be thinking to yourself, why is it important to discuss this topic? Here's why. Have you ever found yourself, oh my goodness, wow. Have you ever said yes just to keep the peace, even when something in you whispered no? I know I have. One thing I can tell you about is I have done this in so many ways. Before I go into getting into that space of discussing this, we need to define what people pleasing is. People pleasing essentially is doing things for other people so that way you can be liked, valued, and not have any sort of diminished perceived value from another person. That is not any sort of dictionary definition. That is the Liliana definition. What this can look like is overcommitting, avoiding conflict, consistently seeking external approval. Now, I need to say this right now. This can often come in the form as care. And this actually can become something much more dire and impactful to you as a human being. And that is self-abandonment when unchecked. Have you ever found yourself going along in life where everything seems to be fine? You're saying yes to all these things. You have connection. You have favor with people. You're doing all these different activities and things are going great, and it gets to the point where you hit this wall? Yes, I know I have. And what this usually can mean is that I've self-abandoned myself somewhere. I've literally taken myself and what I need off the table because I've wanted to please everybody so hard and so much in so many different ways. And let me tell you, there is a huge cost. A huge cost. There's such a huge cost when you do that to yourself. Let's look at it this way. People pleasing can quietly pull us away from our values, desires, and boundaries. And I don't mean this just in a, oh yeah, like you're compromising yourself in a big way at the start. It often starts as little concessions that we don't necessarily see. And for myself, I can say that I have not wanted to see them because it means that in my mind, I've interpreted it as I am trading affinity or people's love for me because I'm choosing to say no. However, I'm not choosing myself in the way that I've been created to be and how I have natural inclinations, desires, hopes, dreams, and values, most importantly, because that's what drives the previous that I mentioned. I've taken myself away from that. And what that ends up doing is that it ends up taking a toll on you. It takes a toll on you in ways that strips you of your love and affinity for others and ultimately yourself. And here's the thing. The emotional toll will lead up to resentment, exhaustion, disconnection from self. Sure, I would take it a step farther, though, that it actually takes you away from true connection with the people that you love that are in your life. And it's not to say that you won't have some kind of connection. However, the connection is not necessarily genuine. So, I would like to share with you a personal example before I go into discussing this whole idea of realigning with your values. I can say that I've done all of the above, the overcommitting, the avoiding conflict, constantly seeking external approval. That has all been things very true in my life. And it hasn't been until the last year or so when I've actually taken the time and allowed myself to really acknowledge that that's actually an issue with me and has been for many years. One of the things that I think about was when I was growing up, and specifically in high school in particular, I had this knack for observing ways to create prestige for myself in a way that did align with my values, like what I wanted to do. And also, I was really good at masking the desire to not want to really fully be with myself and face myself. I didn't know it at the time, but looking back, I can see it pretty clearly. I loved being a part of activities. I loved being in the know. I loved just connecting and being a part of it all. So I did a lot of clubs. I was a part of choir. I essentially was the choir teacher's unofficial TA. I spent a lot of volunteer hours creating the choir program. I ran sectionals after school. I did a lot of extra things that wasn't necessarily necessary. However, to me, I saw them as necessary because I wanted somewhere to go. Not that there was anything wrong with that, because what it taught me was discipline in terms of keeping true to my commitments. And that's something my father had actually established in me long ago when I was growing up. He would say that Spences don't quit, and he capitalized integrity and how being your word was super important, which made a lot of sense since he actively served in the Marine Corps for a handful of years, and there's a lot of things that he took from those experiences and becoming a leader in that space, and which really prepared him to become a father. And there's a lot of admiration I have for those stories that he shared and the growth that he experienced through that. All this to say, though, I did that, and I didn't take to heart where he would also remind me to slow down and to rest at times, because not just with the choir thing, I was also doing swimming. I was also a part of a swing dance club at the school where I was supporting and leading that, and I also was involved in water polo statistics. I was a manager, and these were all things that were good and taught me a lot. However, it also was a great place for me to burn out as well, because on top of all these things, I was also engaged in honors classes and all of that. Also, I need to note this, that during that time, there was a lot of things personally that I was dealing with. Parents were separated, divorced, and there's just a lot of different things where my mom had moved away out of the city that I grew up in. She ended up moving back within a year or so after that happened. The timeline doesn't really matter at this point, but the point I'm trying to get is I was overcommitting, so I didn't need to deal with things. It was a way that I dealt with things. Not the healthiest, but I acknowledged that it was something that needed to happen to help shape me into who I am today. Kind of going into that whole people-pleasing thing and overcommitting, I also had honors classes, as I mentioned, but I had a certain standard of wanting to learn a certain level because I had been in a private school for most of my life, and then I transitioned into high school where it was public, so it was a totally different thing. The avoiding conflict piece is huge, and the reason why it's so huge is because I so badly didn't want to hurt people's feelings. I wanted to be liked so badly. I just wanted to be accepted, because for me, and having the experiences I had, I knew to some point, I knew at a surface level that I was loved and accepted. And there was a part of me deep down where I didn't really believe that. And it's not that I had anything bad or wrong happen necessarily. I had the gift of being adopted at 1.5 from Slobozia, Romania, and brought to the US by a loving family. It wasn't perfect, but it was loving nonetheless. And so, regardless of certain things that happened, I noticed that I did not like conflict. If parents were fighting or arguing, which we all have those sort of things in situations, we all have those communications in relationships where there's going to be disagreements or arguments. And one of the ways I would avoid conflict is trying to do what would please one or both people in the situation. And that was also true when I was very much so engaging in friendships and other things. I never wanted to rock the boat. Like, sometimes I would say something if there were things that needed to be said. But at the end of the day, I didn't necessarily pan out to how I wanted to be. That ended up bleeding into constantly seeking external approval, like wanting to have the words of affirmation constantly given to me. And something my mom said when I was growing up, that I always wanted to have the positive feedback and I didn't really necessarily want to have criticism. I'm not necessarily wording it the exact way that she did. What I'm trying to get at is I very much avoided wanting to necessarily have certain feedback from people. It's not because I didn't want it. I think I just didn't realize the value of having feedback and moving forward in that space. So growing up, I ended up doing things like sports and things like that. And I always tried hard. I always persevered through things. I was very resilient. And that was very true even when I got to the US back in when I was little, tiny little tot, like about 15 pounds at 1.5. But the point is that I didn't realize how resilient and perseverant I was. So it actually ended up serving me well in a way. Maybe it was a coping strategy because I wanted to be the best that I could be. And I didn't realize there was an underlying desire there to have that external approval when I was really already enough at that time. However, you don't see that as a child. And I didn't see the gift that I was building for myself, which was developing discipline through engaging and sticking to hard things, even when I didn't want to. So I kind of just had a moment there where I just kind of ran off on a tangent. However, just to kind of go back and discuss a little bit of why I wanted to talk about this particular thing, why I wanted to talk about this particular topic, rather, is when I was recording the other podcast about the gift of letting go of expectations, I discovered something while I was recording that when I was referring to the gentleman and that experience of putting up a boundary and not feeling obligated to give that individual access to me that they were seeking, I noticed something when I was editing, and there was a part of me that was still struggling with this aspect of people pleasing, of not wanting people to think that this person was a horrible person or something like that, because I found myself saying, as I was looking through the edits, and it ended up taking a chunk of it out, was I didn't want this person to somehow hear what I was saying and then it be this huge thing of like, oh, they're a horrible person, which they're not. But I had that weird space and I wanted to be proved by them, even in that moment. My point is that though you are healing from something, you don't necessarily reach the 112% of completely healed, at least on this side of life. Going back to, or moving forward rather, to the hidden cost, and we talked about you're getting pulled away from your values, and it's not loud, it's very quiet, because each concession you make is you telling yourself no. And what that does is eventually you'll notice that the lines are blurred. You may not be consistent with yourself and what you're sharing with other people or in your actions. And it's not to say that you have to be a robot and be perfect. However, you end up blurring the lines of becoming what people want you to be, or perhaps a people group that you want to be associated with. And what ends up happening is you compromise yourself to the point where you don't even know who you are anymore. Maybe that makes sense, maybe it doesn't. The point I'm trying to get at is it's not good to do that. And that's why it's so important for you to get clear on your values and what's important to you. And some people may not want to make decisions about certain things. And that's okay to acknowledge that about yourself, because that in and of itself is a decision, it's a choice. But just be aware that when you allow yourself that time to look at the impacts of you not speaking up for yourself or developing your values or identifying what those are, it's important. It takes away so much from you, and it takes away your voice, whether you acknowledge it or not. I still have more to say on the topic, but I wanted to ask a couple of questions. One of which is referring back to the beginning of this podcast of defining people pleasing. In what areas of people pleasing have you committed? Have you overcommitted, avoided conflict? Have you sought external approval extensively, I mean? In what situations or moments have you noticed this? I invite you to write them down in a journal. That way you can really look to see if there's any patterns that are coming up for you. And then once you look at all those options, those different listed items, you can see if there are patterns there. And then you can move forward, because one of the things that's really cool about life is that once you allow yourself to know about whatever situation or area of growth you're looking at, once you see it, you can't unsee it. You get to be personally responsible in the sense of whether you choose to go for it or not. The other thing is I'd like for you to look at is, in those areas, what have you been experiencing as your hidden cost? Have you been experiencing resentment, exhaustion, disconnection from self? And really, as I said before, it's really from others as well, because if you are disconnected from yourself, how can you really connect with other people? That's something that I've noticed with myself, especially in the last year, few years really, just how I've changed so much, and looking at the kinds of people that I was connecting with in a variety of spaces, and how in those times and spaces those people really were such a blessing. And those connections, even if they're not as active or present right now, they still hold value to me now, because it's a part of the journey and a part of the growth. There was genuine love and affinity there. However, I'd like for you to look at the hidden costs, as I mentioned, the resentment, the exhaustion, the disconnection from self. Are those related to specific people in your life or situations? And then really think about that. Journal about how that makes you feel. Allow yourself to really open that up so you can experience the movement through it. So I mentioned a little bit about my own experience with overcommitting and avoiding, and each of those things. I talked about the hidden costs briefly. I'm finding I want to go back to this though, because what I've noticed is, in order to be liked through different circles over the years, there's not like a one in particular. It's just I've noticed that when I've agreed to do something that I really didn't want to do, I found myself angry at myself ultimately, but I put that anger out or towards that individual. Maybe it was doing something for them, and it was really not okay, because what was happening in that space is that they were experiencing unnecessary anger that really wasn't even for them. It was for myself and how I was choosing to react to a situation because I didn't actually speak up and say how I really felt about something. And a note on this is I've noticed that it's taken time, but there are certain things I'm more firm on speaking up against now than I have ever been. It's not to say that there aren't other areas where I'm still moving through this. Just the other day, I was actually in an experience where a friend was asking me about doing something, and it was joining people to do an activity. And initially, when they brought it up to me, I was like, yeah, that sounds great. And when it's actually come up multiple times in conversation, I would defer to, I don't really know what I'm doing yet. I don't really know what I'm doing yet. And the reality of it is I had this realization that it's a nice idea. And there's times in my life where I've noticed this before. Like, I really like ideas, and that's really great. But it doesn't mean that I actually want to follow through on those ideas. And so I found myself talking to this friend the other day about how, really count me as a no for now, and I'll let you know if something changes. And the reason why I said that is because there's some other things in the space for me of other activities that are around the same time. And I'm calling myself out right now. Like, this is not necessarily a good thing, because I was raised, let your yes be yes and your no be no. So it's very easy for people in general, and I'm talking about myself specifically, to really want to be a part of everything or engage, but really getting really honest with yourself if that's how you want to spend your time is key. So I've circled back around the other topics or points of this podcast, and I want to go on to the next one. And this is challenging because it's realigning with your values. And for some of us, I know this has been me in the past, you don't know what your values are. I think I've already offered some of these gentle prompts in terms of identifying where people pleasing shows up for you and where the misalignment is with your own personal values. I think that it's important, though, to get clear on those. So I'm going to repeat them. What are examples of people pleasing for you? What does it look like? And where are these things, these events, misaligning with your personal values? This part might be a little more challenging. We're going to explore what it might look like to make peace with disappointing others in the service of not disappointing yourself. A personal example I'm going to share with you. There was somebody that I connected with a lot, and there's a lot of growth with this friendship. And I consider this person still a friend. And there was a lot of things that were going on a couple months ago, maybe a month ago. And this person really wanted connection. And I had to politely turn down their invitation to go somewhere. And this was one of the first times with this individual I really put myself first. I said that the invitation sounded great, and I hope they would enjoy themselves. I didn't make any excuses. I didn't give them reasons why I wasn't going to go or be a part of whatever it was they were doing. And you know what? It was such a weird feeling to be in that space of liberation, because I had spent many hours with this individual, and I took a lot of time to be with them, and I genuinely enjoyed being with them. And if I'm being honest with myself here, and I haven't really taken the time to look at this will be something I look at later, there likely was people-pleasing behavior happening in this friendship. I haven't really taken the time to look at more recently with this friendship how much of it really was or wasn't. However, I get to do that. And here's the thing. When I experienced possibly disappointing this person, I don't know if they were disappointed or not. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Never asked them. I think that it was important for me to experience that there was nothing there. And I made peace with saying no. Because at that point in time, I needed rest. There was a lot of things going on where that rest was important for me to move forward. That was a gift. One of the biggest things I think was it showed me how much I'd grown, because I would fixate on letting this person down or making the wrong move. And I didn't realize it, but there were many times where it was because on a subconscious level I wanted something from them. I wanted that approval, because for whatever reason it seemed as though their approval was more important than my own. And that's a hard thing to sit with. So the importance of getting real with yourself of what it is you really value and what does that actually look like for you is a big deal. And it's really easy to just put things down on paper. Let me rephrase. It can be really easy to just put things on paper. And I get that. It's even harder to put those things into action, and that's what I'd like to challenge you with. My hope is with anything I've said so far that you see how in my life there's been challenges where I've allowed myself to be a people pleaser, whether I was aware or not, and how it did create resentment with some things. One thing I didn't say earlier with the examples, but I became tired and burnt out because there was this level of choosing to perform for other people and be something that I wasn't. So my hope is that you hear all of this and don't beat yourselves over the head with a mallet, okay? I am inviting you to shift from seeking validation from others to cultivating self-trust. And honestly, those things are so important. And I invite you to start small. I would invite you to honor yourself and how you were created by really asking yourself those questions. What are my values? What do I really want for myself, and how do I conduct myself with others? One of the things I'm starting to do, and I feel like I've had some patterns with this, of in some ways allowing myself to have the opportunity to, rather than just saying yes or no in the moment, say, this sounds like a great activity. Let me get back to you on that. Or really allowing yourself to think about the commitment, about what you're committing to. And also being aware that sometimes if you say yes, even after you've thought about it, sometimes what you're committing to is there's more to it than meets the eye. And that's okay. I think one of the biggest things is starting to really look at what's important for you in terms of boundaries and seeing what's important to you. Like, are you going to choose to go to sleep at 9 p.m. every night? Are you choosing to wake up a half an hour early to do prayer or go for a walk or make a smoothie? Those kinds of things. I think that one of the biggest things that I've started to do is checking in with myself after an interaction and whether or not it served me or not. And I don't mean like serve you in something of what did I get out of it, but more of a what value did I create in this and what can I take from the interaction. There's a part of me where I feel like I'm kind of going on a side tangent again. However, one of the things I think is important is that we understand that this is all a journey. And shedding people-pleasing patterns is both tender and courageous. Shedding these people-pleasing patterns is a tender and courageous process. One thing I will say is that you are allowed to choose you, even when it feels uncomfortable. Thanks for being here. You could be anywhere and you chose to be here. Whether it is morning, afternoon, or night, I hope that you have a wonderful day. If you found value in this, please like, comment, subscribe, share this with a friend. I appreciate you and what you're going through, and thanks for allowing me to walk alongside you. Have a great day, and until next time.